As suggested by the last video, we'll be making a ton of HTTP requests as we create and build out the Task Manager REST API. Now, we already know we could make those requests from the browser to test our work as we build out the API. We've made HTTP requests from the browser before in this class, but what I want to introduce in this video is a new tool that's going to make it much easier to quickly fire off all the HTTP requests we need, allowing us to test and verify that our REST API is working as expected. The tool is Postman, and it's basically an industry standard for what it does. Let's get started by installing Postman. We can head over to the website in order to grab the installer. Right here, the URL is getpostman.com. Now, Postman is indeed a tool available for all operating systems, and it is indeed free as well. They have paid plans, but they offer features that we don't need for the course. Things like data synchronization. If you're working on an API with multiple developers, that might be useful later on as you start to build out Node apps on your own and you are collaborating, but for now, it's not necessary. Right here, we can download the application, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the Mac download. Now, as mentioned, there are download options available for Mac, Windows, and for Linux, so take a moment to grab the correct installer for your operating system. We're going to get it installed, and we're going to fire off an HTTP request using Postman to make sure that it's actually working as expected. Then, as we build out the REST API throughout the section, we'll be able to easily fire off requests to test our work using the Postman tool. The goal of Postman isn't to replace a client. The goal is to allow us to test our REST API without having to also create a client to test it with. That's going to allow us to automatically test things like signing up a user with valid data and then signing them up with invalid data, making sure we get the correct response. Now, on a Mac, I get the application file, and all I'm going to do is drag this over to my applications directory. The installation process for each operating system will be slightly different, and once it's over there, we can go ahead and fire it up. So feel free to pause the video until you've installed Postman, then we're going to take a moment to crack it open and get familiar with the tool. Now, throughout using Postman, they're going to try to get you to create an account. That is not necessary, so whenever they say you have to create an account, there's always a way to skip it. There's no need to sign up for their web service, which would be useful if you were trying to do things like collaborate with others. Right here, we're going to skip the sign up step down below. There is a link to do just that. And this is going to bring us right into the Postman tool. Now, right off the bat, they're trying to give us some helpful suggestions, guiding us along the way. We're going to get started by creating a basic request. What we're going to do is fire off an HTTP request for that weather API we created earlier in the class, though we're going to do that from Postman as opposed to doing it from the browser. As long as that works, then we know the tool is set up correctly, and we can move on to the next video and actually start creating the endpoints for the Task API. I'm going to name this particular request Get Weather. Now, down below, we don't have to provide a description, but it is going to ask us to put this request in a collection. And a collection is nothing more than a folder where you can store related requests. So you might have multiple folders for the different projects you're working on. Down below, we can create a new collection. Right here, I can call this something like Weather App. All the requests inside of there will be for the weather application. I'll click the checkbox, select it, and now we're ready to create the new request. So once I go ahead and click Save, it's going to bring us over to the main Postman screen. I'm going to make my Postman window just a little bit wider so we can see the entire application. On the left, we have the history of the requests we've made in the past, and we also have our collections. We have just one, and if we open that, there is a single request inside. Now, there is a whole lot to the Postman interface, and it can be a bit overwhelming, but we're going to go step by step and work with a basic request. So right here, we have our request showing up. If you don't have that, you can always close all tabs and then just click the request, and that'll bring it up right here. So now we are firing off this request, but it hasn't been configured, so it's not actually going to work. We have two main pieces of information. We have the HTTP method we want to use, and we have the URL we're trying to make the request to. Down below, we have additional ways to configure the query string, authorization, headers, the request body, and more. For the moment, we're just going to stick with these two. We're going to leave it at get, since we set up the weather API to use the get HTTP method. Then we're going to provide the URL we had configured. Now, you could always use the URL for your weather application. If you don't have that or you forget it, you can just use mine. That is https://mead weather application.herokuapp.com. Then we set up /weather as the endpoint, allowing you to actually fetch that weather. Now we know we need to provide the address, and we can do that in one of two ways. I could type it right in line up above, or I could configure it down below under params, setting up the key and value, and Postman will do the heavy lifting for me. So in this URL bar, I can use the question mark to set up my key value pair, the key being address, and I'll set that equal to Philadelphia, and I can see those fields have been automatically populated down below. If I change them down below, like changing the value from Philadelphia over to Boston, spelled correctly, we're going to see that the URL up above automatically updates. So Postman gives us all of the tools we need to allow us to test our API endpoints. It's a very fantastic tool, and we'll be using it throughout the rest of the class. Right here, we can go ahead and save this. We can then use send to fire it off. It's actually going to communicate with our server and get the weather response. Down below, we see just that. We have the pretty printed JSON formatted in a way that's easy to read. We have our forecast, our location, and the address, exactly what we got when we made the HTTP request from the browser. Now up above, we have other tabs as well. Right here, I can view the raw response body. Here, I just have the unprettified JSON. And I also have the preview tab, which allows me to view it as plain text. Though when we're working with JSON APIs, using that pretty tab is the nicest. Now, there's a lot of other stuff going on here as well that we will explore as we continue to use the tool. For example, I can see the status code I got back, A200. I can see the amount of time things took, and I can see the size of the HTTP response, all very valuable information. Now, if I were to close this tab and come back to Postman later, I could always just click that item from the collection. All of my data has been saved. I can fire it off and ensure that things are working as expected. So as we add new endpoints to the Task Manager REST API, we'll be setting those up as requests in Postman, making it really easy for us to ensure that things are working as expected. That's where we're going to stop for this one. We'll be setting up our very first endpoints in the next video, so let's go ahead and jump into that.